I've been waiting for you. Welcome to Divine Times. My name's Hilton Milan. And by tuning in, we're inviting you to tune into the divine. And, what is the divine? That's the world where we begin to, and where we actually can make the adjustments, refinements, I'll even say the divinements, to making our peace with mortal life. From birth and all the stories that we live and co-create. And either deny responsibility or accept responsibility, but in time, we just work with what is. And we do our part in the divine to make it a little bit better. First, by non-harming to anyone, including ourselves, and then to helping and healing to, anyone. And that has to start with ourselves. So on the healing path, I wish to introduce you to my most special friend and soul friend, Stephen.
Hi, Hilton. Well, I'm going to tell a story today. It's a healing story.
Yeah.
As my stories are, they're healing stories. And some of them, as I said, come from dreams, some of them from life experiences.
Yeah.
And I just create with it to see where it goes.
Yes.
Now, as I tell this particular story, and any story, I want you to create your own story. Hilton, I want you to create your own story too.
Okay.
So,
and everyone else, yes?
And everyone else.
Yes.
And if I speak in symbols, I want my symbols to evoke your symbols.
All of our symbols. Yeah.
And as I speak, you can even change it into a different language if you want, if that helps you create. And as I speak, you can also
co-create.
Co-create by remembering something from the past, a situation, a relative, a friend, or whatever, because our streams of creation will flow together.
Yes.
So I will be giving the outward story based on my inward experience, and everyone will be building their own inward story that participates in these three streams.
A little bit like harmonizing the divine into our daily, our moment-by-moment lives.
A very, very apt metaphor.
Yes.
Because people can sing together and harmonize. And when they sing together, they produce a note that is more than just the individual person. It's a note of harmony. And that's what we have to do, harmony.
Isn't it so that before, or equally, as it is out there and we work to, if we are working to demonstrate and experience and evolve harmony, it's also incumbent, like we're called to also have harmony inside and be harmonizing.
Yes.
So that there's always this balancing of inner and outer. It's perfectly imperfect, perfectly divine if we're always conscious. And then
yes, like everybody has their rhythm.
Yeah.
It's like an inner metronome, not the outer metronome that's mechanical.
Or driving us, or
those are external things.
Yeah.
We have an inner rhythm. And if we attune to our inner rhythm, where we are authentic and we're being ourselves and we're being creative. So it's a matter of attuning yourself to that. And certainly children will pick up on this. If you say something that you don't truly believe, they know automatically that that's the case. You don't really believe that. Because they have not been alienated and torn from their inner rhythm. They live their inner rhythm from second to second.
Yeah.
And they experience and express the whole gamut of emotions. In an hour's time, they go through the whole human gamut of human emotions. Like my grandchildren, I hear them laughing and playing, then I hear them crying and thrashing around, and I realize that they're not holding anything back. They're always expressing. as we get older, we hold things back, and
and
poisonous toxins, instead of freeing them, they're over, they're gone, on to the next moment of time. The next moment of time becomes clear because we've let things go. Okay.
One tiny confession before you begin.
Yes.
Over a quarter of a century ago, when I met your late mom, Rose, and she told me of her, like really good, her really good son, Stephen. Had worked in business and planning and visioning, and for some reason I had such a heartfelt desire to work with you, and she said, well, maybe there'll be a day. I didn't feel it was the right time. And to see it manifesting now in such a soul felt, and not just felt, but demonstrated relationship,
Yes.
better than dreams come true. It's actually manifesting the dreams of good interworking.
Well, see, this all is fascinating to me because you are the closest person that's alive that has the heart of my mother. You have a very loving heart, and I always recognize that, and I found that amazing. So it's very interesting working with someone who's on that vibrational frequency. And part of people accessing their own gifts and their own intelligence is to have somebody that loves you. And my mother just loved me to pieces. And she was capable of such great love too. And love is like nectar. It's so nourishing. And if people don't get enough of it, it's like they can't develop their potential. So it's good to have someone that loves you, and in certain cases, when they love you, you learn to love yourself. And when you love yourself, then you can create and set goals for yourself. And it's not just for yourself, it's for the goodness of everyone concerned. Because on a certain level, we're all interconnected.
Truly.
And every time that you resonate with that level of self-understanding and awareness, you help the people around you awaken also. Because each of us carries an atmosphere, and it goes out into the world and is fulfilled and comes back. And when you come from a positive place with your body, mind, and spirit vibrating for the goodness of yourself and others, the world takes notice, and you plant the seeds of goodness wherever you go. Interesting stuff. Yes. And sometimes, like this picture, you go inward and connect to your highest place, wherever that may be. For some people, it's a solar plexus. Some people, it's the heart. Some people, it's a spiritual eye. Some people, it's beyond the body, someplace away from the body. But when you start coming from wherever your center is, you become a fully functional human being. And that's where the goodness comes from. It's our innate goodness by centering ourselves and going to our high place.
For me, through this conversation, I have just come to this place of spirit heart, and it is so centering and fulfilling, and I'm understanding that this is, the sacred, divine, the place I can always trust.
Yes, and it's
and serve from.
Yeah, it's hard to find words, but it's like you take in what I say and you add to it. You know, so that there's a rapport in a building. It's like,
Yeah, there's a
Like
there's
this,
a
you know?
manifestation
Yeah.
of you know, not just love, you know, but it's love with peace, with light, and there's a bond
so,
and a reality. Some would call it divinity.
yes, and it is divinity. And all of us need to find people that love us. It's like Jung had a name for it, about the company of others. We need people who we trust and who love us, so that we can realize our potential. And in them loving us and us loving them, we love ourselves. And we move from diversity into unity, and then unity back into diversity.
Can't we just move from diversity into divinity?
Well, the unity is kind of the divinity. But,
Simpler
yes,
put, then we don't have to manage as much of the unity if we keep on looking to the divine heart in each of us and govern ourselves accordingly to be, you know, in our state of wonder, love, you know, in amazement of each moment,
yes.
you know, of, you know, peace, powerful, empowering peace to engage, you know, to enlighten, to entertain, to educate, to enroll, to evolve, you know,
Yes.
within, without, in relationship. And then with this light, you know, bright, as bright as these external lights are, the brightest light is to be found within and igniting that.
Yes, ignition's the right word. Some of us come into this world with our light on. You know, I've talked to people. In their house, the light is on, but nobody's home. You got to be home with your light on. Then you're moving from a center into the world, and that way you can change the world around you by the beliefs and values you hold within you. Yes.
Perhaps as a beginning to opening, you know, the portal of your story, you know,
Okay.
In the path of the divine, if I may offer, in
Okay.
the listening to you then, in the silence, and speaking of finding home. You know, people speak of having homes in their buildings, you know, and some people say they are homeless, and are. What they've forgotten is the home within. And if they can't find it as a whole structure and an external home, the internal home, and, you know, if 4 letters is too much, let's cut it down to 2. Just Om.
Om's a good word.
And it's that frequency, that vibration, feeling it not just in the sound, but like through the entire being, that I thank you for emanating and inspiring and encouraging as you have in me, and for all of us. Let's tune in some more.
Here's the picture of the Buddha. And the hand gestures mean something. There's an opening.
Could you guide me here? I'm not seeing it well enough.
Okay.
So that you can,
Here's the figure.
yes.
Here's the left hand.
And what is
open.
it doing?
It's opening
Like this or
a little bit more down.
down?
And this hand here
Yeah.
is like this.
Okay.
Okay. These are physical gestures that reflect an inner state.
There we go.
This is about, I could do that years ago. So,
Is this about at least a resemblance?
yes, there's a resemblance. Put your left hand down a little bit more, the fingers down, because you're opening to the earth.
There we go. There we go.
Okay. And feel free as we carry on with this conversation If your hands want to take certain positions,
Yes.
sometimes it is the unconscious speaking through body movements. You know, there's like this, there's like this,
Yes.
there's like this. There's all different gestures that reflect inner processes. And sometimes you may not even know what's going on with you, but your hands or your feet or your body posture is speaking to you. Like we know this posture here,
Oh.
you know, but it's like your body speaks to you. If you can perceive it, then you receive the message and you work with it. Okay. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, was the eternal dreamer. And the eternal dreamer would dream a dream, and the dream was the dream of creation. And he was the center of the circle, creating everything around him. And he would fill the circle around him, more like a holograph or a sphere. He would fill it with his creation. First would be the word, an inner word, not one you formulate, and then a light, and then a form. So I'm going to speak of some of the forms that have come through me. A long time ago now, years ago now, I had a dream, and I was sitting on a lawn chair with my mother to my left, and we were just enjoying the sun, and before us was an endless ocean and a blue sky above and a desert behind us. And we were looking out at the ocean, and I could hear it murmuring. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but it wasn't just water, it was a living substance. And we were sitting there in our lawn chairs on the beach, and a wave came up right to our knees. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. It came from nowhere. And at that point, my mother said, can you hear the desert singing, talking in the colors of rhythm and rhyme? The colors of rhythm and rhyme. Can you feel the desert twirling, spinning, like a divine child in rapture, its hands held to heaven? And I kind of felt and listened, and she said, that is the divine. Now she said, take some sand and squeeze it really hard, and then look at your hands. So I squeezed it really hard, and then I looked at my hands, and my hands had become mirrors. I thought, this is very interesting. And I looked into the mirror first, and I couldn't see myself but my grandfather. And then I went into the mirror, and I saw myself on the other side of my grandfather. So I recognized that my grandfather's beliefs and values were something that I embodied. So my mother says, can you see the desert? And I was going to turn, and she says, no. She says, you can't look at it directly because it is the beauty of splendor, and splendor can only be given and written on the tablet of the heart with the soul in complete openness. And those words are very powerful to me. And I said, geez, Mother, you're scaring the bejesus out of me. I says, maybe we can take a pass on this and just get a cheeseburger? And she laughed. She says, use the mirror of your hands to see it indirectly, and you will assimilate what you need. So I looked in the mirror of my hands at the desert behind me, and I saw a funnel of sand, and the wind was giving it shape because the wind was spinning, and the sand actually gave the wind a shape. And I was looking into my hands and seeing the reflection behind me, and that funnel of sand and wind became a pillar of light. And I thought, this is amazing. It had such great beauty, like the beauty of nature that sometimes can really awaken you. And as that happened, another wave came in, and the wave came right up to my shoulder level. And this wave was shocking. And the wave receded, and I looked at my mother, and my mother was looking out to sea. And so I followed her sight of vision, the arc, and I saw this huge wave coming in. It was enormous. No place to run, no place to hide. And my mother turned and looked at me, and she said to me, tell me that story about your grandson who is yet to be born. He won't be born for a few years, but tell me the story about your grandson looking at the picture book with
That was
words.
Max, yes?
And so it just came to me that all time is concurrent, existing in the eternal present, where there's the past, future, the present that's part of past, present, and future. There's an eternal time beyond time and space, and then the whole thing flashed before me. And it was, my grandson is with his mother, and they have a picture book with just one word on each page. And on the first page is a picture of a penguin. And my grandson says, penguin. Now my grandson can't say grandpa, but he can say papa. So he calls me papa. Second page is a picture of a lion below. And he goes, lion. Next page is a dolphin, and he goes, dolphin. Next page was a walrus, and he goes, papa. So even till today, when he sees a walrus, because the walrus has that mustache, he thinks papa before he thinks walrus. So my mother just broke out laughing, and I laughed, and then the wave broke over us and just drove us up the beach, and the lawn chair and me were going head over heels at intense speed and an incredible amount of energy, and we were driven up the beach, and then it drew us back down, and I came back down, and I was sitting in the chair again, and I said, that was incredibly powerful, and I'm in a state of awe and wonderment. And what do you, and I looked over, and my mother was gone. And I realized that second that she had gone back to this infinite ocean from which we have all sprung, And she went back to that infinite ocean of murmurs and echoes. She went back there laughing. And that laughter was the highest teaching I could receive. She didn't go back to that ocean in a state of fear and fighting. She laughed and she let go and she surrendered her soul to that next level. Oh, there's part of this I forgot. I'll put it in now. I looked over where my mother was and I could see some kind of vibration, a distortion in that field of energy of that world we were in. And I went over there and I touched it with my hand and I looked through, and I went into the past and I saw my mother. I was at my mother's home, but she wasn't there, and she was outside by a bus stop. And she was going from a rehab hospital to a nursing home. And then the next day when I saw her, she's being transferred from the rehab hospital to the nursing home. So I was given that information before it happened. This is with the idea that everything is coterminous, everything's happening at once from a higher level. It's not linear causality. It's a simultaneous, concurrent experience of everything now. So now I'm sitting on the chair, pondering all this, and I look up to the beach to my right, and I see two eyes way up the beach, and they're coming towards me. And the eyes look like liquid turquoise. And around these two wide-set eyes, large eyes, a huge cave bear is formed. And just for a moment, I could feel fear spring from me. And I thought, oh, like this. And the bear spoke out, bellowed out, do not coat me, do not cover me with your fear. He says, this is your fear. I have no malintent in mind. And I drew my fear back. And he comes charging down the beach. And he sits down. And I look at him. And he smiles like a Mona Lisa smile. And he turns into a hollow crystal bear. And the sun catches the crystal, and there's all rainbows dancing around this crystal bear. And then the bear fills up with honey. From its feet, it comes up like that, it overflows. And then for a few seconds, I become that crystal bear. I'm looking out through his eyes. I have become the crystal honey bear, and I'm in a state of complete peace and contentment. So this is the dream sequence, and this is the story. And these archetypical symbols that I present will evoke your own symbols, your own symbols. And you weave them together to produce a tapestry of your own self-understanding. You don't necessarily have to interpret the symbols or the signs. They will express themselves. Like I talked to the bear, it said something, and on a higher level, beyond analysis, beyond thinking, I became the bear. If you want to understand something spiritually, become it. That's a level beyond the mind. So whatever you've created from this talk, be in touch with Hilton if you want to share it. Send him your story. Now, depending on how many people submit a story, I can't answer every story. But just in you presenting your story, something in you will awaken. And that's what it's all about. It's awakening something within you.
It's been lovely, Divine, taking your story in, experiencing it, expressing it, evolving it within, and the tranquility, the peace, the love, the light. Certainly, as I know it, have been, divinely strengthened and foundationed, and the beginning of the eternal light.
Yes, it can be expressed as you have said, as a feeling of well-being, of goodness, of light, and all that. Mm-hmm. And it can be experienced as you did with hand gestures and movements, and it can be experienced as a musical composition, mm-hmm. or a painting, whatever way you want to express it, because I said send in your composition. It doesn't necessarily have to be a story. It can mm-hmm. be what you received while this story was being presented.
Speaking of what you received, may I ask you, in your recounting of the story, the his story or the her story, what did you receive?
Well, in terms of emotion, there was, I received the awakening within me of a divine child, which is very interesting because part of the story of that child in the desert, in rhythm and harmony and rhyme, was I received an image and a feeling and even a sound that child was singing. I received that as a matrix to work from, which reminds me, and I'm glad you said that. Okay. I'm going to find this. Yes, I found it. Okay, this is part of what I received. I received this poem by recording this story. And this poem is called Grace. And it begins as such. Her spirit, her light, rains down upon the velvet night. I'll start again. I got a getting hoarse here. Grace, her spirit, her light, rains down upon the velvet night, holding, caressing me in her passionate brilliance. Kiss the sky, embrace the infinite blue of her form. Sing her crimson songs of love, dance with her the ecstatic dance of surrender. Recite poems to set afire the kindling of her heart. Fiery tears flow freely down the beauty of her countenance, falling as gentle rain upon my face, kissing my lips with the downpouring of her passionate grace. Kiss the sky, kiss the sky. The divine child is born. You see, when you go deep within yourself and have an experience, sometimes you're given a gift from that experience. And this poem sprung from that experience. And sometimes the poem can be a guiding light for you. It can be accepting parts of you that you would never accept, or letting go of parts of you that you don't need anymore. And
Amen.
and letting go of the parts that you don't need anymore, you still have to extract the knowledge.
Yes. The wisdom.
It
The
isn't
discernment.
the discernment, because it's there for a reason.
And they've been our greatest teachers.
That's right. It's like now you're transmuting that negativity into positive. So even our bad stories, our negative compositions, our bad pictures, there's a reason for them being there, and they have to express what their wisdom knowledge is behind their negativity. And then you can transmute them. Because beyond positive and negative is the neutral force.
Isn't that also the divine force?
It's the force of divinity. It's love, but of a higher love.
Yes.
But in order to
Beyond ego.
ego, but it's being able to accept the polarities, the positive and negative within ourselves, and recognize that everything springs from a higher source. So we can't condemn anything in our life, because we need all those experiences in order to get to the neutral force of divine love, that neutral energy.
That's what's often referred to as the middle way.
The middle way, yes, in a very much a Buddhist sense, yes.
And even in the narrow way, within, I think, the Christian sense.
The narrow way in the Christian sense, in that what they call the narrow way is the crown chakra that can be opened either in the spirit body or the physical body.
Yes.
And it's like the christening was supposed to open that, and then the setting of that opening, allowing where the human comes in contact with the divine. And that's what we all need to do, is contact, immerse ourselves, become one with that divine force that's beyond negative and positive, that divine force that gives life to the negative and positive and gives life to all life from second to second, whether we're incarnate or disincarnate in a subtle world.
I'm beginning to understand the divine way in this, in sort of the mathematical, a bit of a mathematical structure of the dot expanding in the narrow way.
Yes.
And then from this expansion, also then in the narrow way, then into the middle way, from here, almost like an infinite 8.
Oh, interesting symbol, yes.
Expanding out, and the 8 will shift at times to this environment.
Now you see, this is exactly it. This is translating somebody's experience into your own,
Yes.
and that's where it counts.
And then here,
You're going in the right direction, Hilton.
even the light, everywhere, and also especially within.
Within. And this isn't some Pollyanna point of view. You have to be on course. You experience this light and sound, and it allows you to walk through the world without
Yes.
knocking people over or being knocked over. It's a higher level of awareness.
And of walking the earth.
Walking the earth, your head in heaven and your feet on the earth. That's what we need.
And the heart discerning the way.
a discerning heart because your spiritual eye is open and you can discern.
Working together, the mind, heart, entire body, being, and being as one with one another, and as within, so without.
Within, without, and in between.
Everywhere, nowhere, and infinitely now, here.
Infinitely now here. Very good point. And when you walk in the world,
And work in the world, and play in the world, and love in the world.
you affect everybody. And if 5% of the population can wake up, you have a renaissance. You have a golden age. So you're doing this, you're waking up, but it's helping the collective also. And the way the planet is today, we need people awake so that we can do what needs to be done so that the earth will be taken care of. Our feet on the earth, our head in heaven. And maybe the heart connects both. Yes, there is a collective need. Now, as you listen to Hilton and I, and ideas will come to you. Ideas about how you can make your life better. And like I've said to quite a few people and a few times, when you have a question, write it down or make a picture of it or do a physical movement. And when you go to sleep, look for an answer. And it may come in such a fashion you don't recognize it, but you're going in the right direction. It may be clarified in another dream. It may be clarified by something that happens in life. Like years ago, I heard this story about this gentleman. He needed certain information for his book, and it was not, he couldn't find it. So what he did is that he put his attention on someone giving him the information he needed, and he just held that, and he was walking through some square, huge open place, and somebody came running up to him and said, "Here, I can't sleep, I can't eat, I got to give you this," and gave him the information he wanted. And that fulfilled his dream, and it was an outer expression, and he had that pivotal point, he had that part of the puzzle he needed to finish his book. And we're all interconnected, but he had to acknowledge that and put it out into the world on the other cells of the one body of creation, and so that he could get that information come back to him. So when you go to sleep, you write it down or make a picture or a musical composition, and if you don't get an answer in your dream state, you might get your answer in life. Sign, a symbol, a direction to take. And then, what does it say biblically? I walk in grace,
Yes.
not just in faith.
Yes.
It's probably not it, but the idea is that you can walk in grace, which is higher than just believing something.
Yes.
Because in grace is the experience of what happens in life, and you're open to it. And there's an exchange of information, both within yourself and in you and the world. And then the world becomes, it becomes very interesting, fascinating. Yes. Yes.
And I'm truly, beginning to understand my responsibility in interpreting, translating, and what I am contributing in my translation and interpretation
Yes.
to the divine,
Yes.
or something a little more dramatic. And I prefer the divine.
Well, look at it. Like when you tune into the divine in yourself, you
Yeah.
can begin to see it everywhere.
And it's a comedy, and it's a joy. And sure, there's some sadness, but without being attached to it now, everything and everyone becomes our teacher.
Yes.
And we also, as we are learning, we get to teach, and so there are no problems without gifts in them for them. We have these problems because we need their gifts, and then we've got the solution, and we're the manifestation of the divine in action.
We step out of the river, we're aware of the river,
Yeah.
because we have a certain distance, a certain non-attachment, as the Buddhists say.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain non-attachment. Like this young lady here is looking at the sunset over water.
Yes.
In the act of beauty, the splendor that I spoke of, you forget that you're there, in the sense that what Rumi had said that when he is with God, he no longer exists, for all there is God. So these kinds of moments can wake you up to your divinity. And your divinity has always been there, but it's like your human consciousness covers it.
Mm-hmm.
So you stop fighting with your human consciousness
Battling ourselves or each other,
and start listening to it,
making peace with it and progress.
and stepping out of the river to have peace and progress, because all this stuff is flowing and going on. If you're in the river, it carries you. Sometimes you feel good because things are going well. You have good thoughts, good feelings. Sometimes things are going terrible, bad thoughts, bad feelings. But if you step out of the river, you're detached and you're connected to your own divinity.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows you to become a seer.
Our own sunlight, our internal light, our inner light.
Our own inner light, and the division between inner and outer is gone.
Yes.
Like all there is.
Yes.
Like, back what we said about Rumi, when he's with his divinity, he's no longer there.
Yeah.
That means that him as a separate creature, as an ego, as a bag of bones and blood is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And all there is God. Then he comes out of that state and he lives his life. And Rumi would create in the moment. They had a scribe, maybe more than one, that would follow him around, and he would just create these poems.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't write them down. He would just create them as he was going along. He's having something to eat, he starts creating a poem. He's walking down the street, he starts saying this poem. He spins the Sufi swirl,
Yes.
and that movement itself is a poem. So you can live in eternity and in time and space concurrently, simultaneously, with an open heart and a clear mind and an awareness of yourself as a soul that becomes continuous.
In that continuous, as I'm understanding, experiencing, and now expressing it, we have been taught in many traditions of a trinity. We come into the world, we're, a little baby, it's sort of like, wow, what's this? Me. Well, I need this. I'm figuring it out. But as we become adjusted and we mature, we become aware of others and contribute to them, and then this balance of eventually just becoming one, not just two as one, but even the Trinity. And there are different traditions of it, but in a simpler form, including and perhaps beyond transcending religions, but also honoring all of the traditions, is, for every human being, there's an experience of beauty, of beholding, of wonderment.
Yes.
Of, discerning, discovering or experiencing truth.
Yes.
But truth appears in 7 billion relative ways, all our relatives. And, with our infinite compassion, 7 billion plus as one.
Yes.
And then harmonized through wisdom discernment in our presence of being. giving, receiving, harmonizing, manifesting.
Yes, it's like you're talking about before about there's a transcendence of religion itself. And
You know, it is a doorway and steps and path and
well, they had a picture before this one here, and it showed a triangle of light, and a person was watching it.
oh yes.
And it's like a religion says that God is a triangle. Another religion says God's a circle. Another religion says that God's a parallelogram. But the idea is, beyond the shape that we give to God, is God the light and the voice that is beyond the shape.
And beyond the shadows.
And beyond the shadows, yes.
You know, and you know, the darkness and the contrast then teach us and enable us, empower us to be one with all of it in consciousness then.
Beyond the shape.
Yes.
And it's like that's where you find like all humanity is the same. In the picture after this, it shows you an old person and a young person.
Yes.
And it's like the God force in both is the God force, is the one God
And it's
force.
the eternal one, the same, the infinite one,
Yes.
yet infinitely expressed.
Infinitely expressed through our own states of consciousness. And hopefully this old man
Yes.
can convey some of the wisdom he's extracted from life to the young man. And maybe the child can share his new vision with the bright eyes of a child with the old man.
And the wonder of life. And
A state of wonderment. And, you know, and maybe sometimes the boy becomes a father to the man. Because sometimes children can be very connected to the divine, to spirit,
yes.
and they have their life in front of them and they're full of vitality. And sometimes the old people need to see the divinity in the children so that they can let go. When their time comes, they can let go because they recognize it's okay.
Yes.
And if there's love between people, it allows them to go to the other side or go to a different level of consciousness or have a certain inner peace.
Transform, transmute, and you know.
Transform and transmute.
And even with that, initially it's our translation, interpretation that we can utilize to
Okay, now,
make peace.
okay, listen to this now. I'm looking at this man and I'm making my own story.
Please.
And he's gone through a lot of pain and he's resigned. But because of the presence of the boy beside him, he recognizes that his pain is okay in his suffering because he is being purified. Because even though he's been through this pain and suffering, he is capable of loving the boy. So he's ready to leave this world. And the boy,
When his time is, but in the meantime he's getting to serve even the boy.
yes, and this boy is looking over there and thinking something's good to eat. Because the little boy is always in the present moment.
Yeah.
So he's not trying to impress anybody. He's just living his life. And the old man recognizes that spontaneous, playful
Spark. Yeah.
flow of wonderment from moment to moment. And sometimes as you get older, you become more childlike. Okay, so here's these pictures, and you can create your own story.
Yes.
And what you're creating is parts of yourself put out in front of you so that you can see yourself reflected back, just like the mirror of the hands allows you to see yourself or in my case, my grandfather, and I stood behind him, you begin to see yourself reflected back. And that becomes a level of knowledge about yourself. Oh, look at that. That's the mirror. It's interesting. On the phone. So there's the modern interpretation of this.
Oh, this is the selfies that are so prevalent today is actually a touchstone, stepping stone portal. I am going to suggest, and I believe I'll have the opportunity to introduce next month, some new technology that will empower this to a level never before seen.
Oh, very good. This is very interesting.
So this is another, wonder, because technology is showing up as such a miraculous tool when we empower it to be miraculous in our tasks and daily management and learning and living and laughing and and even stumbling and getting up again. And these reflections back to ourselves to live and manifest and our lives, and as we choose towards finding the best in ourselves and bettering that and expressing that. It's very exciting.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, as I look at this picture here, there's a certain silence going on. Amongst the turmoil of the world, we can look at ourselves mirrored back and we can enter into our own silence. And it's like there's much need of that in the world. There's so much noise, there's so much commotion. Every once in a while we have to reflect on ourselves and enter into silence. We let everything go by, we enter into silence. Then we come out of the silence and we're rejuvenated. If we don't do that, we lose our minds in the world. And we may have everything we want, or we may have nothing that we want, but we've lost ourselves. Because we've reversed the order of creation. We're attributing just the external world with the power over us. But we enter into silence, that external world dissolves into the inner world, and the whole inner world dissolves into silence, and we start moving from a deeper level.
The power within us as empowering, not power over, but
empowering. It's the silent, moving observer that's within us. If that awakens, our life is a symphony. If that doesn't awaken, or we don't want it to be awake, then we're just flowing along with no control over anything, because we don't know who we are.
a little bit more of a cacophony of a lot of sounds going on, perhaps a lot of here, to and fro and there, almost like a drama triangle of in the children's stories, there's often a tyrant, and then there's a hero rescuer, and then there's a victim, and running through that, which is so rampant in so much of our cultures and the presentment of our medias, and then all the contrast of selfish, too selfish, too selfless, and either of these extremes, I've heard it expressed that, and in the selfies, okay, great, perhaps it's the stepping stone, the touchstone to selfness, which is the silence, and then in service, in gratitude.
Yes.
Which also is about attitude, divine attitude.
Yeah, if we start moving from silence
To stillness, to
and
strength.
stillness, you can see it with the Zen monks when they show the sand gardens that are brushed and just a rock here and rock there, you can see the emptiness. You can sense the emptiness amongst all these forms. And that's the silence. And the form is the emptiness is the form. The immanent, what we perceive with our senses, and the transcendent are just one. And in the Zen garden, the transcendent and the immanent, form and the emptiness, are just one from a higher level. And that gives the Zen monk great peace in what he does. And it can give you great peace in what you do. But it's good to set up at the beginning an intent to experience this. If you set up the intent, the experience will come. If you do not set up any intent, it probably won't. An intent isn't just a passing idea. An intent is a serious moving of your face towards spirit, looking towards spirit, the divine face, and say, I want this in my life. And you set up that intent, and then the right people are magnetized and energized. The right situations come to you. There's a certain sense of randomness and serendipity and synchronicity. You begin to connect, doors
and
open.
divinity, divine times.
And divine times. And it becomes a divine time.
Yeah. You know, you're speaking, you know, and teaching your story has inspired and sparked within me my remembrance of an event with the Dalai Lama, where one of the traditions or practices is, I believe it's called the Kali Chakra.
Yeah.
From everythingness into nothingness into oneness.
With the idea of impermanence.
Yes.
And form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And it's a reminder of that. And I think the Hopi Indians,
Yes.
the Hopi Indians also make a mandala like that. And sometimes if it's a healing ritual, they put the person in the center of the mandala. Oh, and there's some of the sand drawings. There's part of the Zen garden.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, it had the word optimistic and it had the word toilet. With a stairway going down. It's like the divine is in the toilet as much as it is in this picture of the sand and beauty.
Yes.
And I've said this before about
Very organic.
about the Hindu saint Chandra.
Mm-hmm.
His mother couldn't find him as a boy, and he was meditating on a pile of refuse. And this is refuse in India. This is refuse. His mother says, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "If you don't find the divine here, mother, you won't find the divine anywhere, because the divine is all." So if your life's in the toilet, learn from it. That's divine too. If it's in a Zen garden, that's fine too. But are you awake enough to be optimistic and open to the guidance of spirit every breath you take? Every breath you take. Watch my lips. Every breath you take.
Stephen, such gratitude. I thank you so very much. Namaste.
Namaste.
The expression, the grace, the God, you know, the goodness. You inspire it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's like there's a thesis, antithesis, synthesis that happens with us.
Yes.
And I trust the same with our audience, that they go to that higher place of synthesis, which is the divine force, the neutral force, the God love.
Yes. The middle way. We are looking forward to tuning in again And this is Hilton Milan thanking for you for your divine attention. We'll see you in the light. Let your divine shine. Thank you, Steve. Yay! That was almost too much fun.